Hello and welcome to Beckler Guitars and Repairs. Today we're going to do a mods and improvement segment. So this is a guitar that I received in lieu of payment. So I did a bunch of work for a client, and he kind of fell in hard times and he didn't have the money to pay me. So he gave me a couple of his counterfeit guitars. So I have a Fender that was in one of the last videos where I was doing a pickup swap. And then he gave me this Les Paul. This Les Paul is actually kind of cool though. It's a one-piece mahogany back body rather. So the body is just one piece of mahogany. The neck is actually one piece of mahogany. Like sometimes on Gibsons they have those little wings here, but this is just straight one piece. The neck's nice and thick. It's kind of like a 50s chunky neck style, which I like. I got bigger hands. It's also got some nice flame on the maple top. The maple top's actually nice and thick if you have a look in the pickup cavities. It's like a proper sized Les Paul. And I put a bone nut on here, which is one of the things we're going to modify a little bit today. The bone nut I have on here, the string slots are a little deep. So I'm just going to use a Dremel tool to take a little material off there to make it a little more shallow. And I also noticed when I'm playing, I can't really get the bends I want on the higher frets. So I want to check to make sure they're perfectly level. This particular guitar has the fret nibs too, which is something those offshore counterfeits are doing now, which used to be something they couldn't do, and that's how you could differentiate from Gibson. You can still tell this is a counterfeit. There's a couple things like the truss rod is not the traditional style. The binding's a little bit off. It's too white. The headstock and logo are definitely off. But I kind of just use this guitar as a road dog. I don't have to worry about it, and I can keep my nice 2003 Les Paul that is my number one. I can keep that safe. I don't have to take it with me on the road or anything else like that. So the other thing I want to do is, so we're going to remove material from the nut. We're going to give it a restring. We're going to check all the frets to make sure they're nice and level with a fret rocker, and then we're going to do a level crown and repolish. Then I'm going to add a Duesenberg Les Paul Trem 2 to this guitar, and install a roller bridge to make it a little easier for tuning stability. And then I'm really going to focus on the nut to make sure that all the slots are well filed, so I have optimum tuning stability. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. Oh, a couple other things I did to this guitar as far as modifications go. I installed Grover open back machines. These were way better than what was on it. They hold tune really well, they work really well. And I've also installed some fancy pickups on this one. This is a Seymour Duncan Antiquity in the bridge, and this is actually a Gibson P94, which is a P90 pickup in the shape of a humbucker for the neck. So I really like the way this guitar plays and sounds. However, I want to make the playability a little bit better, so I want to get these fret issue figured out. The frets are going to be a little harder than usual because of the nibs. So we want to make sure we do the fret work without removing the nibs, which is what you do on a normal Gibson anyway. And I want to make sure that we install this roller bridge correctly and the new trim. So first things first, let's it looks like these strings are a little bit oxidized, so it's probably time to change them anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the strings first. So it looks like the fretboard could use a little bit of a cleaning. I'm not really sure what material the fretboard is. It looks dark like ebony, but And it does have grain, so yeah, it may be ebony. This is the roller bridge that I want to install. I just want to make sure it fits. On my other Les Paul, it was very tight. It didn't quite fit properly. And this one, it looks to be about the same. But I think I can make this one work. I'm not so worried about it on this one as far as damaging the post and stuff. So yeah, with a little bit of effort, I got it to fit on there okay. And I just want to compare it to the intonation on my other bridge, and then I could make a little bit of an alteration to match the intonation on this bridge, just so there's less to do once I get everything installed. So that one's far back. This bridge you could probably also use with a tremolo system. It's got those special saddles. I forget what the material is made out of, but they're a little easier to move with like a Trem system, as far as the string moving in the saddle slot. Alright, so we're just getting it close. We can fine-tune this a bit later. Okay, close enough. And it also looks like this bridge is a little thicker than my last one, so likely I'll have to adjust the action down a little bit to make it work. There. So it fits pretty snugly, but way better than my other Les Paul. My other Les Paul, it was so stiff I could barely get it off once I had put it on. So with this, if you want to know more about this Duesenberg Trem, there's a link in the description to my install video and unboxing. So that'll be in the description if you want to check that video out. So I'm not really going to go through exactly the different parts in the install because you can see it in that video. But it's, if you just watch, it's fairly straightforward putting it together. The problem I had with the last guitar was the provided bolts or screw bolts for the Trem didn't quite fit my Gibson, but these ones look just fine. So this one actually goes in easy. So that's one issue that I had with the last guitar that I'm not going to have with this one. Same with the bridge, so this seems like a much better fit for this Trem. Alright, there we are. New Trem is installed with the roller bridge. So let's have a quick look at it. Everything looks good. So the next thing I want to do is just remove a little bit of material from the nut that I made before. Just so the saddle or the string slots aren't so deep, because that can affect tuning stability as well. They can bind on those slots if they're too deep, so I just want to make them more shallow. I've got my Dremel tool here, wireless, with the sandpaper end bit, so bone really stinks when you're removing material. Very smelly. Smells a lot like burning hair, which is not a pleasant smell. And you don't want to breathe these bone particles in when you're working on it, because I don't imagine it's good for you. But we're getting there. Alright, that looks good. So the slots are still there, but it's just a lot more shallow. So there's less room for the string to bind. Now we're going to check the frets to see where, if any, there's any high spots. Alright, so I'm using my machined steel fret rocker to test for high frets. I'm also going to make sure that my relief in my neck is correct before I do this. So there's just the tiniest little bit of relief in this neck. Typically I like to make it so there's no relief when I do fret work, just so you can start at that like baseline, and then if you need to put a little bit more relief into the neck after you do your frets, you can do that. So let's just adjust the truss rod so that there's no relief in the neck and it's dead straight before we start doing fret work. Alright, so the truss rod on this guitar is a little bit wonky. It's really deep in the truss channel and a little off center, so it's hard to get an Allen key in there. So the arm on this Allen key is a little too shallow to get that way. So what I'm going to do is put it in this way, which it does fit. And then I'm going to have to use a set of pliers to... Oh, there we go. Actually, it moved without needing that. So we'll give it a couple more twists. So yeah, it's moving in there freely without too much effort. So let's check our action again. Okay, so now it's dead straight. So there's no relief in there hardly at all. So that's about where I want it. All right, so checking it with the fret rocker. I'm gonna go 3 frets at a time, and if there's a high point, the fret will actually rock and let me know that that's a high point on the frets that needs to be lowered. So then I'll take a file and start working that way. So I suspect the frets are a little uneven. There's a bit of a high one there. Okay, so it looks like there's multiple spots for high frets. That's what you get with counterfeit guitars. They're not going to be the same level of quality. So it looks like we got high frets everywhere. When I play it, it's not bad enough that there's no like major buzz anywhere on the guitar when you play it, but when you start getting very low action and trying to bend in certain spots, that's when you start to notice the problems. And the only way to correct that is having very level frets. Now Gibson usually gets around that with their Plex system, which is like a machine designed for the Gibson guitars to make sure every guitar has perfectly level frets. But for the like more factory manufactured guitars, they don't go through that system, so it's kind of hit and miss. Sometimes you'll get a perfect guitar, a lot of the times you will, but a lot of the times you won't as well. So I like just to tape off the guitar when I'm using a file, just to make sure that no scratches happen on the pickups or the guitar if I have a miss with it or something. So I've got two different types of fret files. This one is a little bit more aggressive. It's got a wider like file pattern. So if I have a really bad guitar, I'll use this to remove as much material as I can right off the bat, and then I'll switch to a finer file. What I found on this guitar though is not a lot of the files are super high. It's just minor high spots everywhere. So I'm going to use this finer file. I actually made this file myself out of a bastard file and just an old handle, and I epoxied on there. It's been my go-to for a very long time. It works really well, and it's nice and straight. So I'll start with this one, and so I'm just gonna guard the nut with my hand. That's just the technique that I do, because if you hit the nut when you're doing a stroke with the file, it can pop right off, and then, well, you just have to start, you have to glue the nut back in. It's just more work that you don't need. So I'm just going to stand so I get a little bit more weight behind the file so I can cut a little better. And you can kind of feel with your file when there's an uneven part, because it'll actually grip more at a certain spot, meaning that there's a little bit of filing need to be done to make it level. And then once it's level, it's a lot smoother. You'll feel like less resistance. So what I'm trying to do is file all the frets. If you look at it in the light, you can see a shiny flat surface where the file is filed. So you want that to be uniform. If you're looking at it and you see a spot that's not been filed, that means they're not level. That means you're removing material from a couple different frets, and this fret, for example, if it doesn't have that worn area, that means it's too low, and the other frets are higher than that. So I'm trying to make everything nice and level, and they should all have equal file wear. Oh, so yeah, I hit the nut and it popped off. So that's okay, I'm just gonna have to re-glue it. Just more work than I wanted to do. Okay, so just gonna remove some of the material that I sanded off or filed off. And now I'm gonna check with my fret rock. Move on to the recrowning. So I've got two different crowning files. This one is a little easier to use. It's a diamond grit crowning file. So basically you just put it on the fret and then you go back and forth until the area that you've filed, if you look in the light, it's going to be hard to see here, but if you look in the light, there's quite a wide area of where the fret was filed. So what we want to do is when you recrown it, you're sanding over the edges to make that file line very thin. So the thinner that line is, that's the area where the string rests against the fret if you're playing. So the lower surface area that is along the fretboard, the less chance there is of buzz. So if you can get that line extremely thin, either with a crowning file like this, or this is a more traditional crowning file. This one you actually have to manually put the crown on. It's a little more difficult to use, but it has good results, and you can be really fast with this thing. This thing works too. Well, it just sometimes takes too much material off, and then you have to sand and start over again. So this is easier to use, but more time consuming. And this is harder to use, but if you're good at it, you can go really fast. So I tend to use this one more these days, but I used to use this one quite a lot. So let me just show you what that looks like. So if you could put down fret guards to protect the fretboard and stuff like that. I don't usually do that. I clean it up afterwards. Unless it's a really high-end guitar for a client or something like that, then I will put the guards on and the tape and everything. But since this is my own guitar, and I'm not really too worried about that kind of stuff, so I'll just show you how this works. So it's got a smooth area here, so you can't damage the fretboard if you're using that area, and you just go up and over, and you're just filing the edges of that, and then same thing on the other side. And then if you look, I've got a nice thin line there. So it would require a little bit more for each fret, but that's basically the result I'm looking for. With this one, I like to get a little closer with this one. You basically just put it on the fret and then back and forth until it's thin. So this one actually works really well for certain widths of frets. All fret wires, different widths and heights, and sometimes this one works really well. I can see in this guitar, the fret size is almost perfect for this tool, so I will use this tool just because it will be faster with this one, just because it looks like it's perfectly matched to the fret size. Yeah, that's working great. And then you can actually use this other side . Alright, so I've completed my recrown, and I just did a little sanding with, I think this is 200 grit, like foam sandpaper, just to get some of the file marks out and make it a little shinier. And then I used this 1800 grit, fine grit micromesh. Micromesh is kind of like a reusable sandpaper. It's made of kind of a latex material with grit on the other side, and you can wash it and reuse it. This one's seen better days. I need to get another pack soon, but they're great for fretwork and finishing work. So I'm just going to continue with the 1800 micromesh a little bit more. They're already pretty shiny because I did do it quite a bit. I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. But I'm going to just continue that a little bit more. So I've been filing, they're nice and shiny now, and I've been filing horizontally, but you also want to file a little, or sand a little bit vertically as well. That helps with the bending on the fret. So I'm just going to go and do that just a little bit for each fret. Okay, so they're nice and shiny, up to 1800 fine grit. So they're looking good. I recently got this buffing polishing machine, and so I want to actually end up using it on frets, so I might just try this one to get started with it. Alright, this is my buffing wheel. I just got this thing. Not really sure how it's gonna work out, but basically what I want to do is just use it to really fine polish these frets, and we'll just see how good it does here. Wow. Would you look at that? So that's like a mirror shine, and that took about 2 seconds. Wow. Okay, this thing's great. Okay, wow, that was wild. I've never used that machine before, but it's got insane mirror high polish on them now. So wow, that's pretty cool. I'm gonna be using that a lot in the future, because the amount of elbow grease you have to put into these frets to get them to look like that otherwise is a lot. So there is some discoloration that was coming off of that. I'm assuming it's the material from the frets. And it was getting on my binding, so I'm hoping it removes pretty easily, but we'll see. Yeah, it looks like it removes no problem. It's just a little extra material from the frets. Alright, I'm just gonna get you a better look at these super shiny frets. Very happy with the way that came out. Cool. Okay. So yeah, we're almost done now. I'm just gonna glue my nut back in place and restring the guitar. So I just like to use a couple drops of glue just in case you need to take it out again. If they're just totally crazily glued in there, they're really hard to take out. So that would annoy the next owner or me if I need to work on it again for any reason. Okay, so that's good. I'm just gonna take off my tape here. So those buffing machines are also really good for finish. You can buff out any imperfections or something in a gloss finish. So that's probably something I'll try with that as well. But yeah, they feel really, really smooth. Great. So I'm just gonna go ahead and restring it now. Okay, so I just put on my first string and my action was crazy high, and even with my bridge down all the way, it was way higher than I wanted. So the problem with this roller bridge is that it's a lot thicker and taller than my last bridge. So even with this thing down all the way, I had action that was unacceptable. So I think I'm gonna just use my old bridge for now and see how these graphite saddles work with the Trem system. If it has tuning stability issues, I'm gonna have to go ahead and order a new roller bridge, hopefully something a little bit lower, just because I value low action on my guitars. I could also modify this, perhaps. I could take some material off with my grinder just to make it thinner all the way around. So that's probably going to be the next step. Rather than buying a new piece, I'll try to modify this piece to work. I might actually do that now, just so we can see the roller bridge. Alright, so I'm going to take this to the grinder and remove some material and see if we can make that work. Alright, here we are. So I grinded it down with my bench grinder. It's considerably lower on the ends now, so hopefully this will get me the action I'm looking for. Alright, so when we ground this down, we damaged the post holes a little bit, so now they won't quite go on like we want them to. So I'm gonna have to drill these out a little bit more. There we go. So it's actually got quite a bit of a nicer fit on there anyway, now that I drilled those out. And let's just see where the action's at. Okay, great. So that actually worked. My action is now lower than it should be. So now I can just raise the posts, and this bridge is now usable. And our action is very low on the 3rd fret. If we fret the 3rd fret, we can see it's resting almost against the 1st fret. So that gives us really good action there. And then our action at the 12th fret is very low. I'm just going to go ahead and check for any fret buzz up and down the neck. Tune it up one more time. You gotta like that. The action is much lower than I've been able to get it in the past now that we've done the fret level. So let's check the 12th fret. At the 12th, we're sitting at like 1.5 for the low E and like 1 for the high E with no buzz. So that's excellent. So that fret level really was able to let me get the action quite a bit lower than I've had it before. Setup is all finished and everything's looking good, so there's a better look at our nut, which is nice and shallow now, and we cut some contour into it, and the frets are super duper shiny and slick, and the trim is looking good. with our roller bridge. Now we're just going to test the tuning stability. So I'll show you each string is in tune. So there's E. This is a very sensitive tuner, more so than a snark. Okay, so everything's in tune. I'm just going to use the tremolo a little more aggressively than I normally would. Let's check the tuning. E's a little flat. A's right on. D's a little sharp. G's right on. B's right on. E's right on. So yeah, tuning stability is pretty good. I just stretched the strings as well. So as I work in the trem a little bit, I'm sure that the stability will even improve more and more. Alright, so that should be it. Let's just plug it in really quick just to see how this guitar sounds. Okay, we're plugged into the Diamond Del Fuego 212 22 watt amp, the Bugera PS1 Power Soak, and we're using a Holy Grail reverb. Here's the neck, which is the P90. Alright, so the first was the bridge, now the middle. Alright, so now I'm just going to turn on the servo pedal just for a little bit of dirt. thanks for tuning into our upgrades and mods section. So we put in the new Trem bar, which is the Duesenberg less Trem 2. We've upgraded our roller bridge here. We had to do a little bit of alteration to that to make it work. And we did a crown, file, level, and repolish using the buffing machine, so we got nice and shiny there. And we did a little work to our nut, reshaped it, and made the slots a little shallower. And then we put it all back together and set it up and tried it out. So overall, I'm pretty happy with the upgrades. It looks pretty cool and functions quite well too. So thanks for tuning in for Beckler Guitars and Repairs, and we'll see you next time.